Brilliance Audio presents The Inequality Paradox, How Capitalism Can Work for Everyone, by Douglas McWilliams. Performed by Gerard Doyle. The Inequality Paradox, How Capitalism Can Work for Everyone, Douglas McWilliams. To Andrew Richardson, and to all those who have helped me while I've been writing this book. Foreword. Other than being born white, male, and Scottish, and having wonderful, loving parents who did everything possible to stimulate my mind as a kid, and who sent me to great schools and a super university, I have had two especially lucky breaks, which have done much to influence me as an economist. I was fortunate enough to get a job as chief economist of IBM UK in the mid-1980s. This gave me a chance to see how technology was changing the world at a pace that people outside the industry could hardly imagine. Even now, I find those outside the tech industries, and especially those outside the commercial sphere, can find it hard to keep up with the pace of change in the key technological sectors, and see how they alter economic relationships. What I learned about this helped me immensely with my last book, The Flat White Economy. This describes the cluster of companies that has resulted from the tech sector merging with the creative sector to develop a brand new economy, which now accounts for a whole tenth of UK GDP. It really is important to understand this new economy, which works on slightly different rules, and as often happens with emerging and also intangible sectors, is badly described in economic measurements in most countries. But even more important than learning about tech was my good luck in being brought up as an expatriate in both pre-independence Malaya and then emerging Malaysia. I can't defend much that the British did as colonialists, though they did good as well as bad. Malaysians are remarkably tolerant of the former colonials, given what happened in the pre-independence era. But being brought up in a fast-developing economy meant that I was lucky enough to see how economic development takes place at first hand. When I went to university and started studying the subject, it seemed that the models most commonly taught in the West of how economic development took place were flawed. These models relied on government investment and state-run industrialization. Sadly, there was little evidence of this approach working well, and when it did work at all, it did so with great inefficiency. What actually worked in the Far East was a bit different. The state was heavily involved in providing basic services, sanitation, law and order, health, transport infrastructure, and most especially education. But the business investment was carried out by the private sector, with external investors attracted by tax-free zones and cheap labor, providing capital, expertise, and access to export markets. Chapter 5 describes this period in more detail. This mixed model of development worked dramatically well from the mid-1960s in Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, and Taiwan, followed by Thailand and Malaysia, and then about 15 years later in many other parts of the world, including, of course, China and India. It is important to note, however, that the world is changing, and the next phase of development for many emerging economies is likely to be based on a different model, with proportionately more internal and public consumption, and less reliance on external investment and exports. Some have claimed that the success in economic development in the Far East was proof of the triumph of capitalism. My take is more nuanced. Capitalism was certainly involved, but could never have succeeded on its own had governments not also helped. I would call the Asian success the triumph of a mixed model, neither exclusively capitalist nor exclusively state-driven. It is worth noting that there are different Asian models, though they tend, when compared with approaches in the West, to have substantial similarities. Hong Kong has been the most free market, China the most interventionist and state-driven. All depend on an entrepreneurialism that fortunately has not been stamped out by either colonialism or communism. I also concluded that the development of the Asian economies was going to be the driving force behind the world economy in the latter part of the 20th century and much of the 20th.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?